Turn him around.
He's going.
I assume that was a knock. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Public Works Finance Committee meeting for November 12th, 2019. Sorry we're a little bit late to start because we were short a quorum, but we're underway now, and so I'm sure everything will come off without anyone being injured. The first thing on the agenda is the regular agenda, is the approval of the minutes from last time. And while I wasn't here, I did look at the video, and I would approve them as presented.
Oh, well, I have not read them, and so,
You'll have to abstain. It'll have to be,
this one time.
so we may have to postpone the approval of the minutes until the next meeting, I would think,
Okay.
in order to be totally copacetic with
Got it.
parliamentary procedure. The next thing is the disbursement report for October 2019, and Sarah's going to tell us how we spent our money and got our money.
Mr. Chairman, would you please take Mr. Belknap's matter? He has another appointment, number 5, if he could present that first.
Oh, certainly, we can move him up. I'm sorry about the delay, Sarah. I know that you have other things to do, but
It's not a
Bill,
problem.
I'm sure Mr. Belknap will make it even with you at some point.
Okay.
Be very quick. So what's before you this afternoon is a master services agreement with Hodge and Associates. Hodge and Associates did participate in the pre-qualification process that we conducted in 2017. They were added to the professional services roster at that time, but the city has not executed a master services agreement to allow the city supervisor to issue task orders for specific design work. So this is the master service agreement. It would last until December 31st of 2020, at which point in time we will be doing the requalification process in accordance with the recently passed resolution 2019-20. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
That seems pretty straightforward to me, Bill.
What was the work that it's supposed to be for?
So this just covers the master service agreement, that it
Oh, in
really is for
general.
any approved work. The specific project we're going to engage them with is the redesign or the design for the reconstruction of Almond Street and First Street between Almond and Jackson.
Oh, okay.
So that will be the task order that will follow. But in accordance with the recently updated process, we bring the master service agreement to the council for the council's approval, and then the city supervisor is authorized to sign task orders for projects that have been appropriated in the annual budget process.
Didn't these have like a certain amount too?
The master service agreements will
Does it?
not. The amount is actually in the task orders depending upon the individual projects. So that was kind of somewhat of the confusing nature, and that we wanted to separate out the master services agreements that does provide us with the pre-qualified list of professional design professionals we can utilize for the various projects, and then the individual task orders for projects the council has approved in the budget will be authorized by the city supervisor.
Okay. All right, very good.
So I guess we can go ahead and recommend approval of this master service agreement with Hodge and Associates, and we could put that on the consent agenda. I would
Will
think,
do.
for next.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Bill.
Thank-
Okay, back to the disbursement report.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, so looking at month end, October 31st, 2019, our major expenditures totaled $3,780,115. Our largest expenditure was payroll. It was $1,039,811. And we did actually have quite a few expenditures, and so I'm going to point out about 9 of them for you. The largest one is our payment for our A Street Phase 2 to ITD in the amount of $971,758. We had some painting on the northeast tank for corrosion prevention, and that was $44,562. Inflow and infiltration abatement for $46,787. Professional services for Mountain View 6 to Joseph Street for $62,688. We had force main construction on Myrtle Street for $66,990. We had a payment for monitors, laptops, and some Microsoft software licensing in the amount of $62,346. We had asphalt patches for Moscow Recycling Center parking lot for $40,675. We had a half of an annual payment to iCrimp for $131,451, and a payback annual assessment for $47,000.
Okay.
All right, and you'll see in your packet also, we sent out a revised revenue report for September for fiscal year 19 ending. And that's because at the time of our September report, it was preliminary numbers. We've run through, officially closed down the year. We've had all of our accrued revenue come in, and it increased the revenue close to about $2 million. So we thought that was substantial enough to put that through so you all could see it.
Okay. And our overall financial position due to the bond proceeds, I noticed that was up considerably, like.
Yep, our cash and
60%.
investments increased by that about $9 million of those bond proceeds that came in and were recognized on the books.
Okay, it's good to see that they're in place so that we can continue with that construction. Do you have anything further to add?
That's
I guess
it.
we'll sign the report then.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, Zach. Do we always do that in September, where we kind of have to, before we're closing out?
I think that's something we're gonna start doing moving forward.
Okay, because that was the first time I've heard, that I remember, I kept thinking, I didn't remember that before.
And it hasn't been, but it's substantial enough.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the next item on the regular agenda is a lot line adjustment for 2312 and 2306 East 3rd Street. Mike Ray's going to fill us in with the details of this lot line adjustment.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike.
I just wanted to introduce Amy Henrich. She's a new planner in our department. She'll be handling
Amy.
the lot line adjustments,
Nice to meet you.
lot divisions in the future. So this lot line adjustment proposal is from Rafiq Atani, and the address is 2312 and 2306 East 3rd Street. These are the properties at the center of your screen in red. So these, the photos are from last year. So actually all this infrastructure is currently in the extension of Crestview Drive, as well as the 3rd Street extension, which ends up intersecting with 6th Street. This is part of Rolling Hills 8th Edition subdivision. And the surrounding property is primarily within R2, which is our moderate density, single-family residential, as well as these two properties. 7,000 square feet is the minimum lot area, and 60 feet is the minimum lot width for the R2 zone. Closer view of these two properties. So the westerly one is 2306, and that's a little over 8,000 square feet in size. And then the easterly is 2312, and it's 8,473 square feet in size. 74 feet to the east and 70 to the west. And the proposal would be to shift that common lot line 6 feet to the west, which would result in 2306 being 7,328 square feet and 2312 being 9,160 square feet. And both would meet the minimum lot size as well as the width. So the resultant widths would be 64 feet here and 80 feet there to the east. And then this was the record of survey that was submitted for this proposal. You can see the 6-foot shift of the property line here to the west. And then there is a 10-foot pedestrian easement that straddles the property line. It doesn't affect this property, but it does share the common lot line on the property to the east. Staff's recommendation is to recommend approval of the lot line adjustment with no conditions, and we'd certainly be able to answer any questions you might have.
Seems pretty straightforward. It meets all the criteria, so I think this is a consent agenda item that we would approve.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Ann.
Nice to meet you, too.
Sure we'll be seeing you at future committee meetings.
I met her at Fair and Affordable Housing.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the update of the fee resolution for water and sewer GFCs in accordance with the construction cost index. Tyler's going to tell us about that. It's a whopping 3.3%, if I'm not mistaken,
Point.
something.
Yes, sir. Appreciate the time today, and yeah, as Councilman Boland indicated, we've made an update to the way that we calculate the increases for the general facilities charges within the fee resolution. For a lot of years, most municipalities were using their the increases in the rate study. There was some recently there was a case that involved the city of Hayden, north of us, that with regard to general facilities charges and how they relate with fee increases. And it was determined that using a construction cost index was a more equitable way to approach that. So this change reflects that, using that cost index, which is the recommended way now to do general facility charge updates. This is actually a lower amount than what the fee schedule would have called out had we applied the fee schedule. And so as we were looking for this equitable way to do it, we put on hold the increases in the fee resolution until we were able to determine what was the right index to use. This was the index that we determined was the best index for this purpose, and so that's what's applied here is this cost index, and that's the index that we will be using as we move forward for annual adjustments to the general facilities charges.
Do you have some comparisons that you could just use as an example? I see the fee resolution in here for like 50 cubic yards or less, no fee, but 51, what would have been, where would I go?
So this is for the general facilities charges, and so this is for if someone comes and builds a new facility, these are the connection charges that are associated with connecting to the system. And so you would have the charge for like a 5/8 meter, and then a 1-inch meter, or a 2-inch meter, and so those are escalating fees as you move up.
But if that's in our code, where do we keep it?
That's in the fee schedule.
But not this one.
No,
We have a fee schedule.
Is it corrected on the
Yeah.
page where
For-
it's been corrected, it's in red.
Further down?
Yeah.
So this is the old one.
no, this
Well,
is
it's
the,
current one.
that is the current fee schedule that the council passed prior to October 1st, and we informed the council at that time that
yeah.
the general facilities charges were under review,
Okay.
and that once we had selected an index that was defensible.
There it is. Okay, there, I found it. Yeah, I was just looking for the changes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Sorry, Catherine.
Yeah. Thanks. I just wanted to find examples.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what was the number? I mean, this is lower than it would have been with a regular fee schedule increase. How much difference is there?
The Jim, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I know that they were both over 4%. I think one was
4.6.
4.06, I think, and the other one was, I think, 6%.
Yeah, the North Idaho Building Contractors Association versus City of Hayden brought into question impact fees, general facilities charges, and those sorts of things. The court indicated that rather than just subjecting your increases to the same rationale that you do for increasing fees, such as service fees, that they should be indexed to a construction index. So this construction index was the one that the court indicated was appropriate. So we immediately went back, saw that the court was going to speak on that. So we delayed implementation so that we had the latest and greatest, if you will. So this meets those mandates, if you will, of that case.
I'm sure the developers that are thinking of projects in town are happy with this, so it's good.
There's not huge changes, though. I mean, is there more than
Be another 1% on that.
just the ones that are redlined are the changes?
Yeah, it's just
So-
the
GFCs.
it's
Yeah.
just the general facilities
Right.
charges, so
So
it's
there's-
not, yeah. It
It's
just
not a
applies,
huge amount of money.
and it just applies to the lines that are specific to general facilities charges.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I think this would be a consent agenda item as well.
Yeah, it does not have to have a public hearing because it doesn't increase more than 5%. Okay?
Thank you, Tyler.
Is it okay to ask you, it's not on the agenda, I can't. Oh, wait.
You can ask him outside the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're down to reports on today's agenda. The ERP software update, Gary's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, the ERP software is similar to the software that we have right now. It's Springbrook software that we've had in place for almost 20 years now. As we indicated to council during the budget session, we've had issues with Springbrook in the past. Their customer service is not as robust as we would like. There have been modules that we have purchased that we've never been able to implement. The straw that broke the camel's back was the licensing fees. It's a fairly expensive software to license every year. In addition, as you'll recall, we had a $140,000 line item in the finance budget for convenience fees. Convenience fees are fees that you get charged for paying with a credit card or electronic transaction. That comes right out of the city's coffers because we are not able to pass that on to the customer. Just as whenever you pay with a credit card, you get charged a convenience fee. Idaho law allows us to do that, so over the last 2 years, cities have, and counties have implemented, and the state as well, have implemented convenience fees. We went to our software vendor, Springbrook, and said, we want to implement a convenience fee, and they said, no, you cannot do that with our software. So in essence, there is no way we would have had to look for an outside vendor, and we've looked at that. There is a firm that goes by, I believe, the name of Access Idaho, that you can contract with for the collection of a convenience fee. However, it is a separate agreement, it is clunky to use, it's not intuitive, and it has the same effect as what we have now, and that is that it should be invisible to the customer except for the amount of the convenience fee. So with that in mind, we started looking at, is it time to update our enterprise resource process, I think is the actual acronym, but it is essentially financial software, which also allows us to take some other processes that we have that we're paying for separate software, such as permitting and that sort of thing. The city of Hayden and the city of Sandpoint have recently gone through this process. So they have chosen a software firm. We would like the ability to go out and issue an RFP to see if we can garner some interest in replacing our software. The idea is that we're able to recoup some of the $140,000 that we're not able to charge right now. And in addition, that the software is, I'm not going to say it's obsolete, it's just not intuitive. We get only a certain amount of site licenses, which costs money. We are not able to have enterprise-wide people have access to the software, so it's less useful to us. The cost of the software we're assuming will be somewhere between $300,000 to $350,000. It's not a budgeted item. However, we have funds in the 3 enterprise funds would each eat a part of that, probably around $80,000 per enterprise fund. The balance would be paid for by the general fund. Somewhere the impact would be somewhere between around $120,000 to the general fund. So looking at that, we've identified funding to do that in the 3 enterprise funds, and in the general fund, we would utilize funds that we have in general fund capital or unanticipated fund balance carryover. We believe that it's better to do this sooner rather than later, mainly because you only have a certain window of time that finance can implement the software. The software package that both Hayden and Sandpoint used included migration of our data over to the new software, so fairly intuitive. So we would like to proceed with that. We will have a funding package ready to take to council next Monday. If so, we would like to issue the RFP next week and proceed with identification and selection of a new software package.
The net change, if we don't use Springbrook anymore, what we're paying for that now would diminish
Yes.
what we're talking about by how much?
Well,
We're paying some, I can't remember the
we're
number.
assuming, utilizing Sandpoint and Hayden, for examples, their cost was significant, I believe, probably $15,000 a year less than what we pay for Springbrook now. And the cost of the original software was pretty reasonable to them as well. Of course, we're looking for whoever wants to propose. So we're not focusing on any individual software, but that puts us in the ballpark of where we think we've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to cost. But the annual maintenance cost should be less than what we're paying now. In addition, the trend anymore seems to be to allow an enterprise-wide license, or at least enough licenses that everybody who needs to look at the software is able to do so without purchasing additional software.
But we do, what I'm getting at is that we have funds budgeted to deal with
Yes.
enterprise software, and those would go away or be applied to this. So
Yes.
for council, what I'm saying is that we should have numbers that show what the net change would be rather than.
And I can show you, we will be able, once we get the proposals and analyze them, we'll be able to tell you what the net change would be on an annualized basis. Now, that's not to say, I don't know whether Springbrook would prorate the license that we've already paid. We would have to look at that if we identified a successful proposer.
And you're not talking about small change out of the general fund, right?
And we're talking about $120,000.
Yeah, so since it's not been budgeted for this year, where is it going to be siphoned
It
from?
would be out of funds that were appropriated last year but were not spent, unanticipated fund balance. So we would retain those funds in the general fund to be able to expend them. Otherwise, we could transfer those to general fund capital, which is typically what we do, and then transfer them back out. But it seems like that's an exercise in futility, since we would keep them in the general fund balance. So council would have to open the budget later on to authorize the appropriation, but the funds would be there to spend.
Okay.
Yeah, we had no idea at the time we were told that Springbrook would not do the convenience fee. We were in the middle of the budget process, so it was too late to bring a proposal at that time.
But you had enough time to do some research, to get your ballpark
Yep.
for what's out there.
Yeah, we've been doing that since the budget, since July, so we've had about 3 months to take a look at, 4 months, to take a look at it, look at some different things. I looked at a couple of different software packages when I was at my national conference, but we won't know what we get until we put a proposal out, a request for proposal, and get some proposals back.
Well, I think the good thing is you've been clear about all the things that aren't working with the software that we have. So,
Yeah, it seems like we're batting our head against a brick wall a little bit.
not moving forward.
And we'd bring an entire package back before council,
Yeah.
before it was authorized.
Okay, thanks for the update on that. The other report we have today is for a utility rate study update. Tyler's going to come up and tell us about that.
And in answer to your previous question, Mr. Bowen, it was 3.5% was the utility rate study increase for water, and it was 4% for sewer. And so 3.03 was lower in both, but not by a huge amount, but lower.
Thank you.
So yeah, utility rate study, as you may recall, we've been engaged in a utility rate study update. The rates that our previous study runs through 2020, and so it's imperative that in order to be ready for our budgeting process coming up that will start in the spring, that we complete this utility rate study process. We've been engaged with the group called FCS. They helped us with a previous utility rate study. They're pretty familiar with our systems and a very well-versed firm in dealing with utility rate studies. We're in the process right now of finalizing our update to our capital program. Capital programs are always a large component of utility rate studies because, a lot of the money is tied up in that capital. It's in replacing and building the system out to accommodate replacement of aging system and growth into new areas. And so that's something that we're finalizing now. We anticipate having that finalized about the end of this week. Our engineering group, under Bill Belknap's direction, has been finalizing some of the cost estimation that then plugs into that capital plan. And we'll get that back to FCS, we're hoping, at the end of this week. At that point, we will be scheduling council workshops to go through what we're seeing, work through the council, and get feedback from the council. And then we will also put together a citizens advisory group and continue to work toward getting that rate study finalized in the spring.
And are there new components in the rate study that'll come forward?
We are looking at, we're always very concerned about making sure we have equitable rates, and that our structure through our rates is one that helps encourage conservation, that makes people think about the way they're using it. One of the things that we've been working on quite a bit in administration and with the utilities is looking at the sewer rate in particular and seeing how we have our sewer rates structured. And so there may be some adjustments in what we bring forward and propose to the council as far as the structuring of those rates.
Yeah, I've heard from some small businesses that have, their sandwich shops kind of things that have to pay a pretty substantial sewer rate that would be the same as a major outfit that has a lot of fryers and contributes to the fog, the fat, oil, and grease in the sewage system, and that maybe we could have a separate tier for those people that don't. They're rated as a restaurant now, but they don't contribute to the fog, and
Right.
maybe they shouldn't have to be paying that same rate.
Yeah, that's one of the things, that was one of the very specific areas that we've had quite a few conversations on, and there are different ways of looking at things. You can look at loading. One of the things that we really are trying to not get into is becoming the menu police, where, someone says, oh, we're a sandwich shop, and then the first time we see something deep fried, sending someone, an inspector into the kitchen saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so there is some nuance to that, but I do think that there are some ways that we can look at trying to come up with a more equitable structure that helps address some of those things.
When we're thinking about utility, originally, at one point, you thought about the purple pipes. Does that come into play with all of this, too?
Well, so the purple pipe, meaning the reuse system, when the city did phase 4 of a sewer trunk line expansion project over by Gormley Park, we put pipe in the ground in conjunction with that project to accommodate, at some point, bringing Gormley Park onto the reuse system. The real cost of expansion of that system is just the distribution system and the pumps and getting everything there. The advantage of Gormley Park is that it's in close proximity to the university's existing reuse system, and the university has agreed to let us tie onto their system in order to service Gormley Park when we get to that point. In conversations that I've had recently with the university, they're looking at having a project to expand that. Expansion beyond Gormley Park, as far as city properties, would be a far larger project and is not included in what we're looking at right now.
Gary?
Yeah, we've never included a wastewater reuse project except through the sewer treatment plant WRF upgrades. So we're dealing with temperature right now. One of the alternatives, as we're dealing with temperature, would be to remove effluent from the creek. And certainly reuse of effluent could be one of those options. However, piping it back into the city proper to utilize it, say in East City Park, Mountain View Park, that sort of thing, a huge amount of capital in piping and transmission systems, as Tyler indicated. So we've not worked that into the rate. There are options at the University of Idaho for increased reuse. There may be land application. We just don't know what those are at this time. So as we're putting together the rate study for sewer, at least, you'll see consideration of what the different potential options are for dealing with temperature to get our permit where it needs to be and those sorts of things. But we've not gone deeply into wastewater reuse because the cost is so huge.
So you're thinking about a chiller?
That's an option.
Yeah, that is an option, as Gary indicated. Yeah, there's a couple different options, and within the capital plan that goes into the rate study, it contemplates a range of prices to cover what we might do there. And with the city's we've been pretty aggressively engaged in looking at how we can, in the most environmentally responsible and cost-considerate way, address those concerns. And so, yeah, those are options that we're looking at.
Well, what's the temperature range now
The temperature.
before it goes back into Paradise Creek? What's the EPA said?
So that's a mouthful.
I mean, I know that it's been, years and they haven't defined it completely, but I know it's been coming down the pike of what it's supposed to be. So how far away are we? from what they think?
Idaho, the DEQ has a target temperature of 20.5 degrees, which would be an effective temperature of 20.8 degrees. There's a 0.3
Centigrade,
degree.
you're talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah.
The DOE has not finalized their work on it yet. That's one of the complications, is that we discharge right at the state line. And so that coordination with DOE has been part of the hangup, is getting that temperature piece figured out. If that's where the temperature lands, we always have to be in compliance, and so whatever system we come up with has to be a system that comprehensively keeps us in compliance. And so just with that, we would need, for the amount of water we'd have to be able to hold that would be outside of that temperature range, we're looking somewhere in the range of 300 to 350 million gallons of water, is what the storage capacity we need. And so it's a significant project regardless.
If I may too, it's not just a question of temperature, it's a question of when that temperature takes effect. So you discuss growing seasons and all those sorts of things. So all of those have been under consideration both by the Department of Environmental Quality, EPA, and the Department of Ecology in Washington. So, we're subject to all the federal regulations and that sort of thing, but the cost could run from $5 million to upwards of $12 million, depending on what they come up with as a target temperature. So we've been watching very carefully. When Les was here, he had several pilot projects that we engaged in, so it's not a decision that you make very quickly.
There's other balls in the air too about whether that water could be treated to the point where it could be stored in the aquifer to recharge the aquifer, whether we're going to use stormwater. We're going to treat stormwater and use that as part of the recharge program, and those things all tie together. So it's way more complex than the one. We're not solving one problem at a time. There's multiple things.
A lot of
in play.
considerations.
But the update today is to make sure that council understands that we're moving forward with it. All of these considerations are being dealt with. But the biggest thing, and the thing I'm so excited about, is the capital improvement program, actually getting it out on paper, pulling it out of the comprehensive planning for both water and sewer, so that we can actually look at it, and when we look at a rate, we know what the rate we will need to support projects 5 and 10 years down the road. So we can just roll it out, and it's fairly easy to see why the rate is necessary.
And as Gary indicated, we're super excited about this, because also it allows us the ability to really work toward a very intricate coordination between the utilities, because there's big time cost savings when we can coordinate between water, streets, sewer, storm, and start to put projects together, and those cooperative projects. That's where the city can really see some savings, and so this will be a big benefit.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. Even with our facilities, do we have the ability to expand on site? When you have those add-ons that can go within to systems,
Is the footprint big enough? Yeah, we've actually worked really well with the University of Idaho on the footprint of the WRF. And I can't remember when we expanded, it must be 15 years ago now.
For my time.
So there is still, if we need further expansion, we'll approach the university and see if we need it. But the footprint seems to be big enough for what we need at this point.
We've got enough footprint out there to add an entire redundant run, so the whole treatment run that's there, we have enough footprint. It was designed and procured to add an entire run there. And so we've got, as Gary said, it was well thought out. We've got a lot of capacity that we have left that we can take up there.
That's good. Did they ever put holding tanks on reclamation sites?
So the university has holding tanks that they use for the reuse water that we send to them. They have about 500,000 gallons of storage that we pump into, and then they pump from that. And then they also use their ponds at the golf course, our holding ponds, for the reuse water. We currently treat to a Class B effluent. We've in the capital plan that we've developed, we have an alternate means of disinfection, going to a UV disinfection system. That would take us to a Class A, which is drinking water quality. And so that quality gives you a lot more flexibility with where you can apply it, how you can apply it, and you can even then start to consider things like if injection was desired into the aquifer, those sorts of things you can, or direct reuse even at that point, which has become a reality for a lot of places in the country, is it's directly just put back into the water system.
Well, it's interesting to hear both of you talk about the injection into the aquifer, because I had been wanting to ask the mayor about this. A couple meetings ago, he had mentioned, I guess, trying to to re-inject water into the aquifer. And it's the first time I actually kind of heard that considered, so maybe with this study or the information that was coming out of the PBAC meeting, is that where that kind of came from?
Catherine, there was, through PBAC, and Jim knows this as well as Tyler, there was 4 solutions that they came up for future water sources, and one of them is the recharge of the aquifer, which I'm very much in favor of. I think that's the direction we need to go, and I'll be
That's
excited.
the first time I had heard it, and, I mean,
Well,
coming from
we've been talking
you.
about it for several years.
No,
but-
I know that. I'm talking about, it's the first time I've heard that that's the one you are the proponent for.
Yep.
And so that was really interesting, and so I had wanted to read about how that was going to
And
be
the
done.
reason for that, too, is because I think we need to move forward.
No, I'm not questioning
No,
the
no, I know
why.
that, but that's why. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we need it. We've talked about the solutions for so long that now I think we need to have more of an action
Mm-hmm.
base.
Recharge of the aquifer through injection doesn't necessarily mean effluent. It can also mean if you have a surface water detention facility, which we've been talking about east of town, that we've been in conversation with the Idaho Department of Water Resources, that is injection as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're taking it out of the sewer pipe and putting it in the aquifer.
Right.
There's many means to do that.
And
Yeah.
there also means that, you can have, it's more difficult in our system, but part of the studies have been like looking where the natural recharge occurs. And so a lot of places have done like, rather than direct injection, direct recharge, they'll have, shallow ponds that they constructed areas that do infiltration. Yeah, there are a lot of considerations as we look at those things. There's a lot of concerns about emerging contaminants, microplastics, even trace pharmaceuticals. So there are a ton of considerations as you go into that. But as the mayor mentioned, that is one of the alternatives. It doesn't specify water source. In a lot of cases, there's been looks at the capacity in the South Fork and the North Fork, and a lot
Right.
of the surface detention stuff that could be used for an aquifer storage and recharge type situation.
If I recall back previous to 2000 or right around then, Dale Ralston, who's a hydrologist, I think that's his term, up at the University of Idaho, had a pilot project that was actually funded at one time by the state for injection or recharge of the Grand Ronde with water from the Wanapum. And the money went away for that. But at that time, it was controversial as well, cross-contaminating the two aquifers. So it's something that takes a lot of research and a lot of thoughtful consideration before it happens.
No, but the reason I feel like the mayor was talking about it was for the things that you're saying, there's multiple ways to look at it which don't have pipes involved
Yep.
and things that we have to build involved in terms of, it can
Sure.
almost seem more organic. And I mean that in the term of landform types of ideas.
With that complexity, it's going to take time to do all those things.
Right.
And so that's why in my view, that's why we need to move forward with it.
In terms of the rate study, though, in terms of what we're going to charge for water and sewer, it has to do with what's the marginal cost. And in order to know that, we have to know how much it costs to treat any of those sources back to potable. Because that's the cost of the next available
Yeah.
gallon, and that's where we should be pricing it now. And so that's part of the rate study.
Yeah, and if I might, one of the things that we've wrestled with, and Gary has been adamant that we take a very serious look at, is just rate saturation and affordability. It's something we're always very concerned about, is these are critical life services for our residents, and we're very sensitive to the fact that with construction costs outstripping inflation for the last long time, that it's becoming a very expensive thing. And so really trying to balance keeping a functional system and having the money to keep that system good and functional with what our ratepayers can support it's a difficult balance. And so it's a very intricate process that we have to go through to really determine what's necessary and what's the most creative way for us to get there.
That's great. It's good to hear. Thank
Okay,
you.
good
Thank you
discussion.
for the
Thank you, Tyler.
conversation.
Thanks for throwing in
thanks.
there, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Okay, that's everything on today's agenda, so I'll propose that we adjourn.
I accept your proposal. We
Okay.
are adjourned.